It's Monday morning, time for Bring It In, Troops, little Zoom from quarantine show. Tom Haberstroh's here, David Thorpe is here. Tom, are you back from Florida? This looks like North Carolina we're seeing here?
No, this is Florida. This
That's
is very
Florida.
much the in-laws' bedroom. So snoop around.
Wait, did you move to Florida? What's going? Are you giving up on North Carolina? What happened here?
I don't know, just kind of a lot of bad weather came through North
Yeah.
Carolina, and I went to the beach yesterday. So take that.
You just Ted Cruz'd out of there.
Hey, I'm not alone anymore. I feel so vindicated.
Yeah.
I feel so seen.
I made an Olaf in the sand
Did you really?
because he loves summer and it feels like summer outside. And instead of doing a snowman, I made it out of sand just to spite all my people in Northeast.
When we record this show, I usually have a skylight here and I can see like the birds flying by, but it's been crusted over in like ice. And I think there's a thing called karst, which is only found in Antarctica. I think that's what we have here. And right now, as we speak, we're getting another big bunch of fluffy snow on top of that, which is great. Makes me happy.
It's going to be 80 degrees here. Are you in Naples, Tom?
Yes.
Yeah, it'll be warmer for you than it is for me.
Oh, no.
Randy says, I hope you got burnt in a very bad place. It'd be a very strange place, the place that you're insinuating there.
Okay.
It is not that kind of beach here in Naples.
Don't let Randy steer the topics, all right? That's one of the rules. On to basketball, Devin, you're right. Okay, so just official in the last hour or so, Ryan Saunders has been let go as the head coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves to be replaced by Chris Finch. I think we all have strong feelings about this. Tom, why don't you lead us off?
Yeah, so this happened after the loss last night. Ryan Saunders, the youngest coach in the NBA, the son of Flip Saunders, who is a legend in Minnesota. And Ryan himself is just, everyone loves him up there. So this is a huge story here because it's a change from the previous ownership, which is still, Glenn Taylor is still the owner, but very much so, this to me signals that Gerson Rosas, the president of basketball operations, who was hired a couple of years ago from Houston, is making a fairly drastic move here, hiring an assistant coach for another team, the Toronto Raptors, Chris Finch, hiring him away from a completely different team in the middle of the season, in the middle of a road trip, because he thinks he's the guy. And Ryan Saunders didn't just lose last night to any team. He lost to the Knicks, which is led by Tom Thibodeau, whom he was the assistant coach and took over for Tom Thibodeau in Minnesota when Tom Thibodeau was fired a couple of years ago. So that, I can't imagine what that must feel like for Ryan Saunders. Is you lose D'Angelo Russell to a knee surgery. You finally get Karl Anthony Towns back. They've only played 5 games together, D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns. And right when you're able to get Karl back, you're let go after losing to the guy you replaced in New York. So I think what this tells you is Gerson Rosas might have thought that Chris Finch was the right man all along, but felt like he had to hire Ryan Saunders because at that time it was the right move. But make no mistake about it, Gerson and Chris Finch go way back. And I think he is looking at the sale of the team. The Minnesota Timberwolves are on sale and might feel, all right, I have a sense of urgency here. I have to make this move for the coach I think is right for this team because I can't wait any longer.
So Devin's pointing out what, Tom, you pointed out is the other candidate was David Vanderpool. Well, he is the kind of lead assistant who might have been seen as the next guy. He used to work with Damian Lillard. He was a coach that the Blazers loved. And Damian Lillard said, how the hell do you not hire David Vanderpool? And he's right there on the bench and has been in front office successfully, on the front of a bench of a winning team successfully, 7 years. Has also played a major role in the development of a dominant backcourt. And then he said, SMDH, which of course means shake my damn head. You don't want to piss off Damian Lillard, everybody. That's the main rule. So, David, you know a little bit about Chris Finch, or a lot about Chris Finch. Why don't you tell us your views on this whole thing?
Well, before I do that, real quickly, is it possible Vanderbilt goes back to Portland now? What does he want to stay in Minnesota for?
Oh,
That's really interesting. It's one of my first thoughts is David Vanderpool, who was picked over mid-season, probably feeling like this is his job, the interim head coach for the rest of the year. But I'd imagine all things are on the table right now. If they're hiring a guy from another organization to come in during the middle of a road trip, that signals to me that this is all hands on deck here.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to Portland. Damian can get a lot of stuff done, right? So, and rightfully so. Secondly, before I get into Finch himself, is when you're the GM, you're the president, right? And I know Gerson, Rosas, you got to be the boss. There's perks to that, right? You got to pick your guy, and I'm not against that. Clearly, this is his guy. So let's just be fair here. If it fails, it won't just be Chris Finch getting fired. No ownership's coming in. This guy really upset the apple cart, so to speak, with the hiring of Chris Finch, how it went down, when it went down, all of that, right? So you are really saying this is the best guy for the job, and I've already gone on record many times to say that's a myth. It's all made up. There is no any one guy best for the job. But when you do what he's doing now, what Gerson's doing, you really are owning up to no, this is the guy that can fix it. So if it doesn't work, that's on you also. Okay. Now that being said, Chris Finch was the head coach of Great Britain's national team and they trained one summer down at IMG when I was training my pros there. Chris actually had a summer home near where I grew up in St. Pete, not too far from where I am now. And I didn't think he was so great. I wasn't so impressed with him then. I've known him over the years. He was with the Rockets a long time. Supposedly he's got a great offensive brain. I have no idea. Maybe he does. We'll find out soon enough. But I've never met a single player that was excited about working with Chris Finch. I can tell you that. That doesn't mean he won't be a good head coach for sure. That doesn't mean that. But it'd be nice to know that certain guys like playing for that guy. I've just never seen it. I've never seen personality. I don't know that he'll be any successful at all, and it's a mess to begin with. And he's coming in a firestorm, and I don't know if any of those assistant coaches will even be there. Like, does he bring his own staff in now? Does he wait till the end of the year? All these guys now going to start looking for jobs, knowing they're gone for the end of the year, which is normally what happens in an interim situation. The team's a mess, and Anthony Edwards was the #1 pick. And I don't know what Chris Finch is famous for developing anybody. Maybe you could tell me I'm wrong, but where is he famous for that?
Well, the number one thing that is on his resume that I think a lot of people who believe in Chris Finch point to is Nicola Yoket in Denver, 2016, 2017. A lot of people are crediting him, not Mike Malone, the head coach, with the offensive turnaround of that team. They were the 13th ranked team in offensive rating with Jokic on the bench. He's promoted to the starting team December 15th. From then on, the Denver Nuggets were the best offense in the NBA, bar none, even better than the Golden State Warriors. So then you say, wait, who do you give credit to there? Is that Mike Malone or is that Chris Finch? And if it is Chris Finch, then why was he gone in a year and not staying with the Denver Nuggets? Or like what causes a guy to have an offensive turnaround and then take another offensive coordinator job in New Orleans? He was in New Orleans for 3 years and then was with Nick Nurse in Toronto. They have a history in British basketball.
Yes.
So if you can point to anything, yeah. Also the G League with Gerson, who is the GM, basically running that Rio Grande Valley. So there's a lot of if you want to look at a test case of is he a good offensive coach or is he the mastermind that a couple articles have called him, you could point to Nicola Yoket and say, hey, he might have been the integral piece there to say, look, this guy is going to be an MVP candidate one day. We need to start him rather than bring him off the bench. But who knows? Like unless you're in those coaches meetings, it's hard to parse around credit.
There, go ahead, David.
Well, I'm going to quote you, actually.
Oh, good. Well, definitely go ahead.
You told me a story years ago about Terry Stotts applying for the job in Portland to take advantage of LaMarcus Aldridge. He had been with Rick Carlisle, learning how they got great shots for Dirk.
Right.
And that he shared his playbook in a sense. So, all right, Tom, I'm not arguing with you at all. All right, Coach Finch. Karl-Anthony Towns is not Nicola Yoket overall. He's a better shooter. He's probably a better pure scorer. Might be now. He's getting better on defense. He might be. He's every bit the talent Jokic is. Not the same kind of talent, but overall, enormously talented player. And so, all right, let's see. Open up that big genius brain you supposedly got. If we'll see it, we'll know, right? We'll know if you're a genius or not. You got to put up now. You left. You're leaving the team you're with now. You're taking this over. Hey, I hope it works out great. We'll find out soon enough. I tell you what, you can't get much worse than Minnesota the last 2 years. Nothing against Ryan. He was very young. There's no reason why it won't be better in the future. Let's see what Chris has for this team, because as Tom rightly pointed out, they're missing their all-star guard, and their most talented player is a teenager.
I just think, like, let's see that genius brain you supposedly got is like a great, like, put it on the t-shirts in Minnesota now, everybody. Like, let's go cheer for that team.
We're going to get to genius when we talk about Tom's article regarding the Jazz and Quinn Snyder. This is the guy that their GM gave him a talented group of shooters, and he turned it into, as of now, the best team in the league. Oh, here we go. Good segue, I guess. And so Quinn has done his job. They were relevant.
Let's not segue though. I want to have one more Ryan Saunders thing. So all right, this struck me when this happened, and I was like, oh wow, there seems to be an unusual connection between Gerson Rosas and Chris Finch to make such a bold move, right? My first thought was a little bit like when Daryl Morey was probably on rails to lose his job, they made a very controversial trade to Clint Capella, Robert Covington, like a big gamble, right? Like you have very little to lose, you could make a big bet. This struck me as like, okay, so they're, like you say, David, they're all in, like this is the bet. Which just reminded me of a while ago on TrueHoop, we did a bunch of writing about the Rockets. And some of the people who had worked for the Rockets that I talked to were particularly disappointed that Rafael Stone was going to run the team, and because he had done certain things that eroded their trust in him and the organization. High on that list was this move in 2015 where everybody thought Chris Finch was going to be the next coach after Kevin McHale was fired. There's a lot of backstories to why they thought that. It involves Rio Grande Valley and advanced stats and certain approaches and blah, blah, blah. But everybody thought that. And then Rafael Stone got heavily involved, and it became JV Bickerstaff, who got the interim job. And so most of the role just doesn't matter at all. But but one of the other little things that was very clear, this was like something I heard from, not even kidding, like 8-9 sources, was that Gerson Rosas and Rafael Stone do not get along. They had some kind of falling out, and when Rafael became the guy who runs the Rockets, this just came up again and again. That struck me like, oh my gosh, like there's a little thing with Gerson and Chris Finch on one side and Rafael on the other. And this whole thing feels to me to be very much an echo of 2015 Houston. And now it's what everybody thought was going to happen in Houston is happening in Minnesota.
Yeah. And I think one thing we should also point out is the Minnesota Timberwolves have this motto of like family first, like they're all about family. And I think a lot of that is born out of the Flip Saunders passing and then Ryan Saunders becoming the head coach. And it's a way to wrap your arms around an organization in the North, very cold place. Like we have to come up with some sort of campaign to make people want to come play for us. And one of those pitches was, we're all about family here. And there's also this detail in this story that from John Krasinski over at The Athletic that mentioned that Ryan Saunders is expecting his second child in the coming days. I mean, in the coming days.
Wow.
And you can imagine in an NBA season how grueling it must be for Ryan Saunders in a season in which you're always on the road and you're locked up in your hotel room, and you have your second child on the way, and you're an NBA coach. You're probably not getting much sleep. Part of me almost thinks that this was a way for Gerson, and this might be totally off base here, but you can see a way in which Gerson is giving him kind of just an olive branch here, being like, look, we're going to make this decision soon. do you mind if we just make it now? And rather than hold you on through the All-Star break, let's just part ways here. And maybe Ryan is just like, yep, I don't want to keep doing this anymore if you don't think I'm the guy. And so there is that part of this, which is, this has been a really tough couple years for Minnesota with the George Floyd killing in Minneapolis, and Ryan Saunders dealing not just with that and being the face of that, but also Karl Anthony Towns' mother and a lot of people in his family passed away due to COVID. So you have so many things that make this an incredibly difficult year for that organization. For Ryan Saunders, he might just be like, you know what, I just don't have the energy anymore to do this.
Oh, I mean, I agree with all of those things, and it very well could be the case that Ryan was even part of this a little bit. Like, hey, I can't reach these players anymore. I'm not being successful. They got to pay him the rest of the year anyway, whatever his contract is. So he gets to be home. But there's a larger, darker shadow on this whole thing, right? Which is, okay, when did you know it's very clear Gerson always knew he was going to do this. And again, I'm friendly with Gerson, but fair is fair. You know you're going to do this. You were waiting for the opportunity to do it. Maybe it was 3 losses in a row, a loss to a bad team, whatever it was. But you're just going to hire the guy that you know best. And you may really feel in your heart of hearts that he's the guy, Chris Finch. But there's supposed to be a process for hiring. And this goes back to something that's very, very important to me. When I was a high school coach, we had team meals before every game, home and away, right? We catered in food, we had raised money, and we made every black player we had sit with a white player at a table for 2, every single game, home and away. And we made them sit that way on a bus to every trip. And we told our white parents, make sure you invite all of their teammates over for food and vice versa. I don't care where you live. We had very rich black kids too. Make sure these kids have got to learn how to connect with people socially outside of the court, because that's the way deals are done. So what I'm saying to you is Chris Finch was buddies with Gerson, and maybe he was a good coach too, right? He won a championship with RGB in the G League. He's been this so-called mastermind. I'll believe it when I see it. But that isn't just the reason why he was hired without anyone else being interviewed or considered at all. And if they were considered, I want to see reporting on that, because that is I didn't know what David Vanderpool looks like. No idea. But for Damien to react the way he reacted tells me something's foul here.
Well, I do know that David Vanderpool interviewed for the head coaching position when they officially hired Ryan Saunders, and same with Chris Finch. So this, in many ways, this seems like a delayed hiring. Is that 2 years ago when Ryan Saunders was hired as the head coach, he was the interim head coach when they let go Tom Thibodeau.
Yep. And
then after Gerson Rosas came on board officially, he did an official coaching search and interviewed David Vanderpool and decided that Ryan Saunders was the guy, right, to be the head coach at that particular time. He brings in David Vanderpool as the top assistant coach and interviews Chris Finch along with that. Now, who knows who had the official call there, whether that was Glenn Taylor or Gerson Rosas, who had just taken over for the job.
True.
What I do know is that in the middle of a season, he decided Chris Finch was going to come in here in the middle of a road trip and be the head coach, which screams to me that he's pretty damn sure, Gerson Rosas is pretty damn sure that this is the right pick in his mind.
It all feels not sudden, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, in a manner, it's very sudden, the final execution of it, but it's such a small world, right? Like, all of these people have known each other for a long time, right? All these people have worked together in multiple cities. And like, David, you talk about, like, if you're an athletic director, you have to have in your pocket everywhere you go, like the list of all the coaches that you'd hire if you
for every sport.
have this one, right? Like, same thing in the NBA, right? There's 30 jobs. There are people with full-time jobs just placing NBA coaches and GMs, right? Warren Legary, et cetera, right? Like, those people don't just wake up and get surprised by this kind of news, right? They've been talking about this for a long time.
Who represents Ryan? Do we know?
Ooh, no quizzes, David. Remember?
I don't.
I'm just curious because I know for a fact what a lot of these guys like to do is when they're pitching their guy, they're pitching their guy. And if they don't think the owner or the GM is feeling it, they pitch their next guy.
Yeah.
They'll pull the wrong right of their other guy,
Yeah.
even if he's currently in the coaching position.
Right.
No, keep him. If they sense trepidation, okay, fire him, hire this guy.
Well,
Yeah,
because one other thing happened here, right, is Glenn Taylor's paying more, right? So like if you take NBA employees as a whole, they just got more money from an owner, right? Because now Ryan Saunders is going home and being paid not to work, and now Chris Finch is also getting a big pay raise, right? So like, so in the game of like employees versus management, like employees just scored a victory as a group, right?
Yeah, and I want to also mention that 5 games, that's all that he had with D'Angelo Russell and Karl Towns. That's it. 5 games with the 2 franchise pillars, and you cut ties before you're able to get D'Angelo Russell back after his arthroscopic surgery. So it almost seems to me like, were they going to drag Ryan Saunders through the All-Star break and have to continue doing this? Or did they see this as an opportunity? All right, let's hire this new head coach before the All-Star break so they can treat that as a training camp on the fly and bring in a new voice in the locker room. I don't know. I'm not in that locker room. I don't know those huddles, whether Karl Anthony Towns or Anthony Edwards had been at odds with Ryan Saunders. But what I can tell you is it's very odd to make a coaching change in the middle of a season, in the middle of a road trip, when you don't have a soft opponent coming up next. A lot of times you see in the NBA, a team will fire a head coach when they have like 3 days off and the next opponent is just dog shit, right? And so they can kind of build a little bit of momentum, even if this is just bizarre, like in the moment, bad decision-making. The next game for the Minnesota Timberwolves is the Milwaukee Bucks in Milwaukee. So congratulations, Chris Finch. Welcome to the NBA head coaching position. Now you got to deal with the Milwaukee Bucks. I know they're not playing great, but that also is not a very fun matchup in your debut.
Maybe the takeaways, NBA teams just shouldn't have mottos like it's all family, it's all in the family. Like that's not like you just can't live up to it.
It ain't. I know that franchise well. It ain't. Yeah, they can say whatever they want. It's not true.
Okay, so Tom, you wrote a really fantastic story about the Utah Jazz. I guess the team that's in the most like politically conservative place in the U.S. And you and I decided this morning to title that story "Shoot the Fucking Ball." How do you feel about that right now?
So here is when you are Mike Malone, where I'm going to give you all the credit for Nicola Yoket on this headline, and I'm going to say this headline is all you, baby. This is not. Like a lot of people are like, hey, that article you wrote in 2017 had this headline. Oh, I can't believe you wrote it. I'm like, I didn't write the headline. On this one, actually, Henry was like, hey, what do you think about these headlines? And I say, that one sounds like it'd be.
But Tom, I can pass the buck so many ways. So I know this sentence because you wrote that George Yang quoted Quinn Snyder, who said it. So like, who can you really hang this on? Right?
It's not me, basically, is the answer. Yeah. So the article, it's one of these stories that I feel like everyone was trying to explain what's happening with the Jazz. And there was this huge thing that was happening that I didn't feel like was getting enough attention, which is they're taking a lot of threes, but there's a philosophy in it in that they want to get open threes. And one of the ways you get open threes is shooting it in transition quickly before the defense gets set. And they're like trying to figure out, all right, who are we getting in? Wait, the ball's already up. Oh my God. Joe Ingles just made a transition through 23 seconds left on the shot clock. Jordan Clarkson does this all the time. He's actually 3rd in the NBA right now in 3-pointers made within the first 5 seconds. This isn't everything, right? They're not taking a shot within 5 seconds of the shot clock every time down the floor, but it is a change in philosophy for a Quinn Snyder who was very much believing in ball movement. They had 360 passes per game in his first year. Now it's down to 290. That's 70 passes fewer per game. And I think a lot of it is just a change in philosophy of like, they got their asses handed to them by the Houston Rockets. And then they go out and they get a bunch of shooters and they decide we're going to be the 3-point shooting team. And we're not only going to do that, we're going to do it super fast in ways that this Utah team has not been known in decades for being that kind of brand of basketball. And I think that's why the Utah Jazz are the best team in the NBA. We already knew they could do great defense, but the offensive side has really changed.
There's one interesting thing here, and the article has so many different things in there. I'm just going to add to it. Quinn's philosophy on ball movement, guys, was he believed that guys will play better defense if they feel a part of the offense. I've heard him speak on this, like in clinics and stuff. And I never agreed with him ever, but it was working. I also have to acknowledge that. And I've done so on like ESPN and other podcasts. I didn't agree with what he said, but I said, I can't argue with what he's doing. They end up playing top 5 defense most years in this philosophy. Guess what? They're still playing great defense and they're not sharing the ball. Instead, it's let that motherfucker fly. You know what I mean? So he's found a way to keep them excited and happy. And the guys that don't shoot, which is basically Derek Favors is the backup center, Rudy Gobert is the real center, and that's the only guys that don't shoot, they're getting dunks and layups because you got to pick your poison. So he's found a way to keep them all willing to really guard you, which they do. And now his offense is upgraded to a significant degree. And adding that variance allows them to play with the superstars. They don't have AD, LeBron, Paul George, or Kawhi, or Giannis, right? Their best player is Rudy or Donovan Mitchell. I love Donovan Mitchell. He's not those guys of their level yet. This allows that to be mitigated a little bit because they can beat you in the aggregate when they get hot, right? They almost beat the Clippers the other day and didn't shoot so great. Go ahead, Jimmy.
We should talk about the blender.
Yeah, the blender is very similar to our Cuisinart discussions with the Warriors. Tom, why don't you talk about what you learned of the blender?
So George Yang said there's a we have what we call the blender, is when they run a pick and roll and they start to ping the ball around the court, forcing teams to rotate, and they get dizzy. They're in the blender. And as I wrote, they make smoothies out of this. Is just they have quick passes down into the paint and then kick out to shooters and forcing all these rotations. And that's really, I think, Coach, you've taught me this in the past, is the number one thing you want to do as an offense is to force decisions on the defense. And when you're doing a pick and roll, boom, decision number one. Are you going to show? Are you going to drop back? Are you going to switch? That's a huge decision. Oh, we're going to dump the pass over here into the paint. Now what do? We have to rotate. There's a lot of decisions that are having to be made with the Utah Jazz offense. And that is what they call the blender. They want to get teams in the blender. And one of the ways they do that is to have 4 live shooters out on the 3-point line and making those decisions so much tougher. If you don't have a good 3-point shooter in the corner, that decision is very easy. It's not a blender, right? It's a handmade meal. It's like, oh, I'm not gonna stay over there and defend that 3-point shooter. I'm just gonna collapse into the paint and guard Rudy Gobert and just forget about that guy. But if that guy's shooting 50% from 3 in the corners, I don't know what to do. I'm yelling at the coach, like, what do you want me to do? It's a running dunk or an easy 3-pointer. And that's what they're doing. The Jazz are forcing these hard decisions, creating the blender. And at the end of the day, they have a top 5 offense, and just that wasn't happening in Utah for a long time.
So I brought up the blender because David was talking about the idea of getting touches for the big men, right? And they aren't passing it so much, but George and Yang explained to you, Tom, and actually Quinn both did that, like Rudy on offense or Derek Favors on offense, super important. Because like if Jordan Clarkson or Don Mitchell are going to shoot it from behind the screen, then that means Rudy Gobert's defender is going to have to run up there and try to stop him, right? Now Rudy's running to the rim, and as George explained, like Rudy's a giant. So probably the help defender coming to protect the rim with Rudy rolling at the rim is not nearly as big. So Rudy can just dunk, and he leads the league in dunks. And heaven forbid there is someone big enough to stop him dunking. Now we just get this easy pass to whoever's left open in the corner is guaranteed to be like a 38+% 3-point shooter. And as George says, it's a system that works.
Yeah.
Well, look at it from this point of view. You just said it, Henry. So Rudy Gobert leads the league in dunks pretty much every year. Right now, he does it again. It's always he and Giannis, okay? But Giannis doesn't have, Giannis has a different role. Obviously, he's primary ball handler. But they're also competing to lead the league in 3 points attempted. We've been talking about this in TrueHoop and bring it in since day one in preseason, because we noticed it in the bubble last year. They might lead the league in 3 points attempted and percentage. They don't in percentage right now, but they're close. The Rockets, when they were leading the league every year in 3 points attempted, were middle of the pack, other than they got fouled a lot. They were middle of the pack. This team might end up being the best shooting team of all time and take the most threes at the same time.
Yeah.
And then they have a guy that leads the league in dunks. Think about that combination. And they're also the best defensive team in the league because that dunker also is the best rim protector. So that combination is, again, how you can make up for not having one of the all-time great players on the teams have.
I have like a deep thoughts, David. So, all right. The dunk spot in the NBA was like on the baseline, out of the way for like your guy who can't shoot, right? But most of the dunks now are coming from like this Amari Stoudemire role, right? The Rudy Gobert role, where you're like
rolling.
Yeah, you're rolling and you're flying like a beautiful bird through the air, and that's interesting. Like, where the dunk spot has moved, right? This guy can't shoot. This Buck Williams or whoever would be in the dunk spot can't play anymore on a good team anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the Nets played differently, right? With James Harden. If you watch the Nets, so we'll talk about the Nets. They don't play the way the Jazz is playing. They dribble it 75 times. He and Kyrie. And you can't guard that either. It's a very different way to play. But the Jazz don't have those guys. They have their own guys that they take advantage of. So, and George Niang, who last year was one of their best shooters, and the year before that, is not shooting great this year, although he's playing great defense. That's the one guy. They have not eight great shooters. Of their top 9 players, they have 8 really playing well offensively. He didn't work all off season because he was injured somehow. He had to recover. He'll come around. He's a brilliant shooter. And that just adds to them. They can still get better on offense while still being a top-rated defense. It's a scary thought if you have to play them if you're the Clippers or Lakers.
Right. And you kind of think, how is a team that employs Rudy Gobert and Derek Favors, the best three-point shooting team in the NBA? Like, that doesn't, like, hey, we want to be the best three-point shooting team in the NBA. Let's employ a guy who can't shoot outside of 5 feet. And then Derek Favors, who's just going to be a dirty work, like, set hard screens and roll the rim every time. But it makes sense when you think about all the attention, the vertical spacing, the gravity of having to stop a dunk at the rim of Rudy Gobert. And it's so hard to defend. And like, I feel like we've trivialized the term dunks, but said another way, that's the most important shot in basketball, is you're putting the ball in the hoop. You're literally putting the ball in the hoop. And so if you're Naismith just dreaming up, like, what is the best offense? Well, it's the one where you can drop the ball into the hoop. And the Jazz have figured out, hey, you leverage that guy who can drop the ball into the hoop by also surrounding him with shooters who make it almost impossible to stop a guy from dropping the ball into the hoop.
Well, let's give you credit on your article for something else you did. You talked about what you referenced and included the article about summertime, right? Henry and I go back a long way with this. The Spurs.
No, Tom does too. Tom was integral in making that article.
Of course, right. So the Spurs knew that Miami's defense was the fastest defense basketball has ever seen. And so the theory always has been, to that point, work the ball around and you'll get good to great. That was the Spurs. That's their line, good to great. But not against 5 cheetahs. Those 5 cats, Marlon Chalmers was their slowest guy that played. They can fly. So you better take the first open shot you get. There's no guarantee you'll get a better one. In fact, it's unlikely you often will get a better one. And that freedom of the Spurs, of letting it go, is what Quinn is adopting with the Jazz team now.
So when I asked Quinn Snyder this the other day about the philosophy of taking early threes, he said, for a long time in the NBA, that was a bad shot. And now teams are starting to use it more, employ it more. And he didn't say it, but they use it more than anybody. But he said, a lot of my players have a tough time wrapping their minds around that could be an unselfish play. Taking an early 3-pointer seems like the most selfish, most like alpha dog, me first thing you could do. But he's arguing the opposite, which is, if you're a really good 3-point shooter in transition, which Joe Ingles is, he's a 50% 3-point shooter in the first 5 seconds of the shot clock. If he bombs away in the first 5 seconds, that's a layup. It's an unguardable play. It's great. But Joe Ingles has to be convinced, like, hey, that's a shot we want. And one of the things Quinn Snyder said to me, which stuck with me, is if you don't take that shot, you might turn the ball over. Taking an early 3-pointer eliminates the worst possible outcome, which is you throw the ball away and then they run and get a fast break on the other end. And the Utah Jazz were not a good team at taking care of the ball. And a lot of that might be due to the fact that they're overpassing, where they're trying to make passes at the end of a shot clock, and you cough up the ball and then the team's running the other way. An early 3-pointer in this way of thinking is preventing the worst outcome, which is turning the ball over and generating a fast break the other way. And the data does not suggest, I know a lot of people say this is, well, early 3-pointers are probably not offensively rebounded a lot and then transition opportunities the other way. That's in theory, but actually the data, and I have to dig this up for probably a later article, it does not suggest that an early 3-pointer creates transition opportunities nearly as much as a turnover might. So that's interesting. Is Quinn Snyder says it's not a selfish play. A selfish play might be, overpassing and the team gets a turnover the other way, going the other way.
They had a specific strategy. They built everything to make this not selfish for Jordan Clarkson, right? Like, so by this, I mean, you explained to us, like, they got Derek Favors. It seemed a little bit of a random signing to me, I'll be honest. Like, oh, they go out and get this guy. Like, why? But the fact is, like Rudy Gobert and Derek Favors are uniquely skilled to be the one non-shooting big man at both ends in this system, right? And they're racing. You have that. There's a little clip of like Jordan Clarkson shoots. I mean, just a come sit down kind of shot. For most of my time watching the NBA, they pull you out for this, like, one defender back. It's a loose ball. He races to a loose ball. He's kind of covered and just hoists a three with no one else in the frame. And it turns into a Rudy Gobert put back dunk after a little bit of drama. But that's because Rudy is part of the system where as Jordan Clarkson is empowered to shoot this three, which looks crazy. Rudy Gobert is racing and talented at racing. He's training a P3 all summer to be ready to race right down there and get that ball. And this is what they do.
It'll be interesting. I was asked recently, like, what will keep the Jazz from, doing great in the playoffs? And I focused on Clarkson because he is just a man on his own. That dude has no interest in passing, nor maybe should he, by the way. Nobody can really guard him. Either he misses or he makes. The defense has nothing to do with it, it seems anyway. And I don't know that he can do this in the playoffs when a team like the Clippers are going to put Marcus Morris on him, or Kawhi Leonard, or Paul George. He's not seeing those guys often right now. If they double him, then the defense could be in trouble. Well, if he's won the pass, which is a very big if, because he is surrounded by good shooters. And they tend to play Conley with Clarkson a lot for that reason. And Donovan, they kind of take turns with Clarkson. I don't know if he can do it one-on-one against all these great players, but in the regular season, he's the runaway sixth man of the year. I mean, he's probably an all-star level player this year. He won't make it, but that's how important he's been to this team. I do worry about the postseason for him and them, but it's working out for sure.
Man, I was mad on Friday night. As a writer, you're supposed to be unbiased and be like, yeah, I'm not rooting for a team, but that is all bullshit, man. Like, when you have a feature that you've worked on for weeks or months or whatever it is, and it's like, all right, we're going to run this thing out on Monday. And then they just take a total dump on Friday night, the game before your article is supposed to run. And I'm telling you, like, if you're a writer and you have this article about to drop saying this one thing, and then that one thing doesn't happen right before your article, or other things happen before your article that make that article, it doesn't hit as hard. It's hard because that Friday night they play the Clippers, and a lot of the demons about, hey, should you play Rudy Gobert in the playoffs? Like, can you finish games with Rudy Gobert? It came back to haunt them in a game against, the Clippers. They didn't win. And I don't want to pin this all on Rudy, because I think that'd be misplaced. He dominated them the 2 days before, but they came out with just, man, they looked like they partied all night in Los Angeles the night before. They had no zip to their offense. They got killed on the boards. The second chance opportunities, they got worked, and the Clippers went small at the end with Marcus Morris Sr. at the center spot. And I don't think it killed them, the Jazz, but I certainly think that it was not a great look right before we were supposed to drop that article today.
I disagree, though, Tom. I think that when a team plays as well as they played for as long as they played, and someone like you decides to write about it, and then they finally don't play so great, to me, it's a reminder of how amazing their accomplishments have been, because every team has tried to slow them down.
Yes.
Right? No one can do it 20 games in a row, whatever. What were they, 19-1, less 20, whatever it was?
Yeah.
And it's the Clippers, and Kawhi and Paul George have been out a week. And they were spry and rested, I thought, for sure. Conley had just come back, and I don't think he was feeling himself. The Jazz they definitely went small. Morris played some five, then Batum played five the rest of the way. They didn't play Ibaka. And I don't think the Jazz were really ready for that. They didn't take advantage the way that I think they would if they played them again. They would have run some better stuff to take advantage of the fact that Morris can't really guard Gobert inside. And but even then, there was a play. It was like a 5-point game, and Donovan Mitchell misses a tough layup. This is like 3 minutes to go. The game is very much in the balance. So Donovan Mitchell missed it to cut it to 3. They come down. Marcus Morris hits a contested jumper, hits the rim 3 times, goes in, and all of a sudden it's 7 with 2 to play, whatever. Like the game was right there, and the Jazz didn't play great. The Clippers played pretty well. I still think I probably favor the Clippers in the postseason over 7 games for the reasons I've said, but I'm not sure. We still have a long way to go to get to that point. We'll see how much better the Jazz get.
Did the Clippers do something to make Jordan Clarkson 1 of 7 from 3, or did he just have a bad shooting night? Yeah.
No, you know they did? They just played 5 dudes.
Yeah.
Everyone plays 5 guys. They play 5 guys. Clarkson, I don't know how he makes it. I'm telling you guys, watching Jordan Clarkson play now is similar to the first year Steph Curry clearly came from another planet. As someone who's watched basketball my entire life, that first year with Curry where he went nuts, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. That's how I feel sometimes when I watch Clarkson. These are terrible shots. Terrible shots. And don't even forget his runners and floaters and little buck. He's not small. He looks small. He's 6'5". He's a big guy, and he's very athletic. He doesn't always show it, but he is. He's like Ben Gordon, except probably better shooter off the dribble when Ben was the best 6 man for the Bulls. You couldn't guard Ben one-on-one, but he's taller than Ben Gordon too.
So one of the things that you hear a lot in the NBA after a game that I think we should come up with like a dictionary for people when they hear a player say a word, but they actually mean something else, is Rudy Gobert after the game said, the Clippers made a lot of tough shots. What he wanted to say is they made a lot of bad shots that had no business of going in. Yeah. And sometimes it's a make or miss league and you're going to lose those games. Whenever you see a player or hear a player after a game say the other team made a lot of tough shots, they just, what they really want to say, and they can't say it, is they made bad shots. And what are you going to do?
If you're a dealer in blackjack and you really want the house to win, which I don't think they really care so much. In fact, they get tipped better when the house loses. And you're playing with someone and the guy keeps hitting on 16 and getting a 4 or 5. The house is fine. Like, yeah, they may lose for a while, but they're not going to lose over the course of a day, week, month, year, right? If guys keep hitting on 16, no matter what the dealer's showing, they're going to lose. That's defense in the NBA. We've talked about this blackjack. And so that's what Rudy is saying. Yeah, they made a bunch of they hit on 16 a bunch and got 21 or 20 for this game. But we can live with that going forward.
I did a thing during I watched this game and I loved watching this game. I mean, it was a very high level game, right? Like these are 2 really good teams and they were playing hard, or at least one team was. And but for a while I just watched Jordan Clarkson. And one thing that I haven't underappreciated thus far in his career is he is so tough. Like, he throws his body into big, strong people, play after play after play. And it seems like he's impervious to it, which tells me that deep down, he's just really tough. Like, there's a reason LeBron doesn't drive every time, right? It's because they beat him up, right?
True.
But Jordan's just like, raw! He'll just go again and again. Like, that's off to him. The other thing was, I noticed this year, Mike Conley's like crazy high in the defensive stats. And so I'm just trying to like, what's that about? What's going on there? And try this, everyone. It's a fun little game. Like, when Mike Conley is around, the other team coughs up the ball. Like, it's not always because he poked it free, but he's helping, or it's his guy sometimes, but often he's helping in very strategic ways. I'm sure, David, you could talk about it more, but he's not gambling. It doesn't feel to me. It seems like he's making he's got the scouting report and he's memorized it and he's inserting a hand into a passing lane, or whose shot did he block Kawhi.
I've watched 25 games since then.
He blocked Kawhi's shot like clean because he just knew what was coming, right? And I'm pretty sure it was Kawhi. And but yeah, I feel like just watch Mike Conley on D. He's a little bit of a Picasso at this phase of his career, and it's not always obvious, but things are happening for him on D.
He's having like a career year before he missed those 6 games. So you mentioned the Kawhi. Let's talk Clippers Nets. You guys,
can we bring in Gerard for this too? Maybe.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Did you watch it last night? I watched it last night a little bit today too.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you're talking about. Did I watch what?
The Nets Clippers game last night.
Remember, no quizzes, David. I bet Gerard did.
No quizzes, Coach.
Flopapalooza. Flopapalooza.
Yes, I did watch Clippers Nets last night.
There's a lot we can talk about from the game, right? There is the Harden flop, which happens all the time. I want to juxtaposition later, Judy, if we have time, with the Zion Williamson trucking Tristan Thompson to send the game into overtime, and getting the foul called on Thompson. And yet Kawhi, who did not extend his left arm, he just kind of held the flipper here as Harden was grabbing him, and then Harden threw himself back again. He's not the only one that does this, and they called the offensive foul. But the one thing I didn't like about the game is it really did look like Kyrie a little bit, mostly Harden, were in that take turns. I'm just going to dribble a million times and shoot it. Harden was amazing for sure. I don't know what you have to make of the Nets, is my point, Gerard. Durant's not there. You know, at some point he's going to have to be mixed into that trio. I'm not ready to buy them yet totally, especially not defensively. Although DeAndre Jordan played freaking great. He got the game-winning tip. He played great in the game on both ends when it mattered. But the Clippers were fine. Paul George, they cut him out at 32 minutes. He was upset about it afterwards, understandably so. But they're smart. They're smart not to push it. He's having an amazing year again. They're very good teams, obviously. The Nets really have an offense that can cook you, but it can be pretty damn one-dimensional still. What do you think, guys?
I mean, I think you're seeing it in different iterations and versions, right? Like last night seemed to be a little bit more your turn, my turn over the course of the current 6-game road trip, 6-game winning streak and the 5-game road trip. You've seen other things, right? You've seen them getting more guys involved. I think it looks to me like I'm seeing different versions of it. And what that tells me is it's an evolving offense and team, right? As guys get to play together more. And then remember, their 3 most important players have only played 7 games, right? Like, so it's going to look like this sort of like, oh, one night they look like this. It's going to be like that for a while just because you need reps, right? The teams that look great have what? Continuity, right? Guys have been together for 2, 3, 4 seasons. So it all works like, to steal Coach's line, like jazz, right? Well, you know, when you're throwing dudes in and you're just doing a random meetup and you're playing downstairs at the bottom of the blue note, well, it's going to be, you know, pretty good. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit, you know, that's how it's, but the advantage they have is it isn't, you know, the 1,000th best tuba player or the 400th best drummer, right? It's, oh shit, it's Kevin Durant and Kyrie. So they're going to fight, even though it may not look aesthetically pleasing, because they're so good, they might win anyway.
One thing that I want to ask Coach and Gerard and Henry too, is like James Harden very clearly wanted to lay out the red carpet for Kyrie when he got traded there and was like, you know what, you're the guy. Like, I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to let you be the alpha dog on this team. I'm going to focus on getting assists and being the point guard. And I think he's been praised for doing that, is coming into a new situation and letting Kyrie know that I am not here to take your job or your place on this team. And I almost wonder if it might backfire on them, because you see games like last night where Kyrie took 9 shots in the fourth quarter, and a lot of them were just bad. They're bad shots. And Kyrie is one of the best shot makers, tough shot makers in the league. But I wonder how much of that enables Kyrie's most frustrating tendencies is to just try to make something out of nothing, which on this team, there's a lot of stuff. Like, it's not like you're trying to paint with no paintbrush and no colors there. Like, he's got a full assortment of options on this team, and just him taking all these wild shots at the end of the game. I wonder how much of that is James Harden being like, yeah, you're the guy. Like, this is your team. And he feels enabled to do those things.
Well, I can tell you what I saw, and John, maybe I missed some things, but there was a long period of time where I didn't know if Kyrie was on the court, and he was. It was all Harden, and Harden can't be guarded, okay, to be fair. And so then at one point, I remember being surprised that, well, why did you give the ball to Kyrie there? And I said to myself in the same moment, well, I know that fucking shoot it. Because that's a lot of time what that mindset is. Like, if you're going to take all this time, now it's my turn, no matter what happens. So it almost worked in a reverse that way, Tom. I do think that James is good enough a player, and Kyrie and Kevin, to figure this part out. I really do. I don't know that they will, but I do think it's possible that they can figure it out. I will also say, and Gerard, maybe it's noticeable from you at the beginning, they used to run some good stuff in Brooklyn. I liked what they were running when Kyrie and Durant were the guys. I don't feel that way now. I feel like I'm watching the Rockets play, except it says Nets on the uniform.
Yeah, I think one of the big things. So the secret sauce, though it's not secret here, is Durant, right? That is the secret sauce, because they both know Kyrie and James, when he's on the floor, no, that's the guy, right? Like, so we got to run the right stuff. But when it's those two by themselves, you tend to get a little bit of that. Oh, I think I might be better than you, especially from Kyrie's standpoint, even though we know Harden's obviously clearly superior.
Yes.
Yes.
But you're right. Coach. You do see that. And I think that, again, this is time, Nash, and I do think that they are all smart enough. And surprisingly, I think, or maybe not surprisingly, but I think they're willing, because they want it to work. I think when they're all on the floor, and again, Nash has a way in which he can talk to them that, as much as he's young and he's learning on the fly and all this sort of thing, I don't know what other head coach possibly could talk to them. Like, I'm not sure who that would be, but I think Nash has a way that he can be like, all right, guys, what do we think about X, Y, and Z? So I do think that will come around once Durant's back. But yeah, that is something that bears noting and watching, right? When Durant doesn't play and it's just those two, what does it look like? I looked at the on-off numbers or the offensive ratings, and when it's three of them, of course, it's ridiculous. But when it's either two, it's still fucking ridiculous, right? Like, they just score a shit ton of points for 100 possessions, regardless of who's out there. And ultimately, right, because they're so good, at the end of the day, that may just be enough, right? Because you have three people who, good luck stopping all of us, right? Like, because it's really hard to do that.
It's not, though. So I remember the Dean Oliver research into the Thunder in their heyday, and basically the more the other three guys had the ball, the better the Thunder offense was, right? And it's not that Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant didn't earn the right to control the ball. It's not that they weren't the best. It's just that, think about the blender in Utah, right? Like, that's how you really freak out a defense, right? Is you have no idea where the attack is coming from, right? You're so many square feet to cover. People are in a panic state, right? And to me, like, I don't know if the Nets, like, they'll have the advantage of talent from the three. Will they have the advantage of a system that really moves the defense and stresses it? Like, well, that's TBD, right? I know that's what Steve Nash thinks about, because that's the defense he played into, offense he played in, right? And Mike D'Antoni, etc. But I feel like, so George Yang told Tom in some detail that, like, if you shoot the three from behind the pick and roll, before the pick and roll even really happens, then you might get a three and you've created all this space. But if you dribble four times, then you will get a contested two, right? It won't be open and it won't be a three. And that's what the Nets will mostly do, right? They'll do a lot of that, right? Which is great if it's those players, but it's not quite the same as having the system just deliver you a bunch of buckets you would otherwise get.
I'm still, maybe I'm just so entrenched in my opinion that the Nets were not going to be that good this year.
Yeah.
Just calling myself out for my bias here.
Me too. I did the same thing.
I just didn't think
haters, Henry and Tom, you're haters. That's
total fact. Total fact.
It's actually not a B, it's a T, Haberstroh. So did I get that one? Did that work?
I'll give you that.
Okay. So I think Bam McMahon gave me that nickname once. So the Brooklyn Nets, I think that's a great win without Kevin Durant, fantastic win. Great road trip. But do I see anything from this past week that makes me think the Sixers and the Bucks wouldn't have a heyday with Giannis and Embiid on that defense? I'm still not of the opinion that the Nets should be the favorite in the Eastern Conference. I still think they would have a lot of issues dealing with Embiid and Ben Simmons and maybe the best 3-point shooter in Seth Curry. I just think and Danny Green. I just think it's not enough. I'm not convinced that what they've done recently is any reason for me to put them above those two other teams in the East.
So what we're talking about, right, is a sort of a thing that I look at all the time, the idea of regular season play versus the postseason, right? Like in the regular season, you get to play Minnesota and Cleveland and all these terrible also ran teams. You get to rack up wins. And I'm wondering, when you watch the postseason, why does the basketball look different? Besides the fact that when you're only playing good teams, you don't get to play Minnesota and whatever, and there's no back-to-backs. Everybody's got, besides all that stuff, like, why does the basketball itself look different, right? Like, why are all your fancy, split cuts and secondary actions, how come that shit gets blown up all the time, right? Like, and why does so much of it, and as the later you go in the playoffs, so conference finals and finals, why does that seem to my eyes, matter less than, fuck, I need some dude who can get me a damn bucket because they're not letting me do this other shit I want to do.
Or I need someone to get me a stop.
Yeah,
right?
Well, that's what I want to talk about. So very quickly, there's what Gerard, of course, is saying is right to a point, right? KCP was huge for the Lakers. All right, he wasn't getting himself buckets. Guys got him buckets. All right, Fred VanVleet actually got himself buckets, and who would have thought? We didn't realize then how good Fred is. There's always going to be the secondary, tertiary, and on in terms of value. There's no question that if you're playing great defense against the Nets, they've got 3 dudes that can score more efficiently when guarded than almost anyone on the planet. The problem that I think that Tom is talking about, and I have this equal concern, is the other team may not need to have to get to that point. If the Nets don't do a better job guarding generally, they wouldn't have to need that great bucket getter. They can just run their actions. They can run those post splits, Gerard. They can run nice pick and roll the naked side and have the open lane. And anyone can do it because they're not guarding. I do think the Nets can play better defense than they're playing. I absolutely believe that. I just haven't seen it yet consistently.
You see it?
Right?
Yeah.
They need to get better at it. If they show a month where they're top 15 even in defense, my opinion will change.
Also,
that hasn't happened yet.
Like, this is such a difficult thing to predict, this team in particular, right? Because they have, like, we just talked about Kyrie taking a bunch of bad shots and then it cost them the game, right? Like, he might make all of those in a different game, right? It can totally happen. Who the hell knows when that's going to happen, right? Like he might go 18-25 taking all bad shots, and that's just, you're just going to lose. And
you're losing that game.
Yeah, that's how that went,
Right. Right.
Do, however, Tom, they do, like, there are moments where you see them do the Cuisinart, where it's Joe Harris, and you're like, holy shit, if all of that craziness is going on, well, then you're literally dead, because then it's like, I can help off no one, like, because I'm going to get cooked every single time.
Yeah, and it's just like Bruce Brown shows up and is just like, oh, I'm going to just get all these little bunnies around the rim. He's like the Lou Dort, where it's just like suddenly, oh, I got to figure out what to do with this guy. Like he's going to bust his tail defensively. And now I got to figure out how to stop him. Like, this team is so hard to guard. And Joe Harris is a freak shooter and good defender. So like, I'm not saying they're a bad team. I just don't think they're like far and away the best team in the Eastern Conference.
They're a work in progress.
Yeah, I like how you put that. I like how you put that.
I'm certainly want to moderate my earlier comments. I've gone from like, this is never going to work to like, well, see.
I hope they scrub the internet of all my takes on this team.
Let's remember on Wednesday, let's revisit the second best team this month has been the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And somehow
and Chris Paul, when you said Lou Dort, I thought of this. What CP did with Oklahoma City last year was happening in Phoenix now. Chris Paul, they're not going to probably win a championship or get to the finals, whatever. But if I had a hat, I'd tip it because they're doing a hell of a job, man.
Right, Tom, close us with 30 seconds on Terry Rozier. Go.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Celtics.
Just the shot that he made over the weekend, and then watching the Celtics self-implode. Just what we have to remember, our takes when trades happen or draft picks happen are not set in stone. Terry Rozier is shooting 46% from three. He's shooting out. He's 21 points a game, an amazing shot maker. And I think everyone assailed that deal for the Charlotte Hornets, and they're playing great basketball. And Terry Rozier is a big reason why.
You're saying the Celtics need scary Terry? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, Kemba's trash. No, Kemba, all of those things that went into that Kemba trade are still true, which is the Charlotte Hornets just did not think that it was worth that kind of money, and they really like Terry Rozier, and it's looking pretty dynamite right now.
4 years ago, I know someone.
So, Tom, we got to end. Sorry, legal's on us.
4 years ago.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, David. Thank you, John. Thank you, Devin. Thank